all of the drama, all of the tension, all of the bad blood between CSB and Canada Soccer for years has been put aside for a brand new deal that both seem pretty confident about. So all it took was CSB to change their name and completely rebrand to it's Canadian Soccer Media and Entertainment. Got that correct? Not Canada Soccer, Canadian Soccer Media Entertainment, a CSME, which I'll be honest is going to take me a minute to get used to the acronym because CSB just kind of fit well with CSA. But so be it. They got a new deal, which is something that Kevin Blue said was absolutely crucial and important when he took the job in 2023. And it took a new CEO at rebranded CSB, but now they've got a deal done that both parties seem pretty good about and happy with. And the revenue share that they've discussed seems far more practical for an organization that is still growing rapidly in many ways and an on-field product that has elevated considerably, where they're in completely new marketing and commercial spaces than they were even 4 years ago when the men's national team qualified for Qatar.
Before I dive into it, I just say there's some joke to be made there about CSA, CSB, and then, you alphabet, CSC, CSD. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but someone can connect the dots. But all that to say, you can see the influence of new leaders. I think that's what the big thing I would say before you get into the deal itself. Like, you have to remember the original CSB and Canada Soccer deal was just signed under such a vastly different landscape in terms of where the national teams were at, in terms of how they were broadcast, in terms of their reputation, and then you consider the leaders too, right? This was before even Nick Bontis, right? This is an old leadership. We're talking Victor Montagliani, and whatnot. So you look now, a few years later, you got Kevin Blue on Canada Soccer side. Obviously, he's coming in, been transformational. Now heading into 2 years on the job it's been since he was hired in 2024. Now it's been, time flies, and obviously James Johnson comes in last year on the CSME side, a new commissioner of the CPL, also the CEO of CSME. You can see just how different the leadership of those two in particular, the way they were able to sit down, hash out a deal. I think it's fitting that both end up speaking right about it, because it just shows this new unity that was built, because it always has felt in the last 2 years, not only has there been that strife, but there's been a clear division of, you don't really see these two sides, together. So I just want to say that leadership side is certainly important. Yet when you look at the agreement itself, that's kind of the priority. It's both sides helping each other. Obviously, before it was more of a fixed rate, and while Canada Soccer obviously benefited from that earlier in the deal, that meant as it wore on longer term, that didn't maybe allow them to capitalize on the potential that they had is so much. Whereas now it's all about both sides helping each other. The more revenue you bring in terms of sponsorship, the better it is for both sides, and especially for Canada Soccer long-term to capitalize on the growth. So that's the big thing that stands out. Two new leaders trying to drive their respective organizations forward without, sacrificing or scuppering the other.
100%. And both James Johnson and Kevin Blue deserve tremendous credit for this. And to kind of sum up some of your points there, what I hear from that is, and what I took from their announcement and the way they spoke about this deal is, you now have both sides incentivized to be better. And in any business dealing, in any type of scenario or business dynamic where one side is incentivized to work harder, or one side has considerably more work to do to get to a point of reward, then you run into a real problem of plateauing or a real problem of motivation. And on this side, with this new deal, clearly both sides stand to benefit from being better than how they went about things before. And I think that's going to have a huge effect on the organization. It's going to have a huge impact on marketing and the business side. And when we talk about the ecosystem that is this growing, still very infantile soccer professional ecosystem, you do have a group in CSME who always had a bit more of a business edge and savvy to it, and more connections to do things differently than a national sports organization. And now you have a national sports organization that benefits more directly from that, and for being better organized and being better at executing their own things. So I really like it from that perspective. And then also, as you say, it's tiered. It allows for some growth. It allows for a change in dynamics and the space of things. The broadcast rights will change before this 2037 section of this deal expires. And I think that they've framed it very well, where you have a lot of room for growth and adaptation. And you often don't see that in sports business deals where you have business types trying to correct things or do things in a way that the either original bodies or the governmental bodies didn't do in the same business mindset or business facet.
Well, sports often financially, it's always about the here and now. It's what are the figures looking at like right now, revenue. You hear all that talk, but sometimes the risk is you see it all the time, especially in rights deals in particular. Of course, that doesn't tie into this specifically. You see it all the time. TV rights deals will sell, and in some cases you'll get undercut, and then your product explodes, and then you're on that side. But then you have what's been going on in other sports where they almost predict too much of like, okay, my property isn't as valuable now, but it will be valuable, and they hold out, and then you kind of end up what's happened with MLB, right, where it's ended up really fractured and all over the map. So it is interesting to see that this deal kind of has a bit of combination of the here and now. Like, you see the figures laid out, they're vast, like the 50-50 split until 10 million. That's compared to the old deal reported around 3 million fixed, right? Like, these are astronomically, that's 3 times the figure we're talking about in that split. Like, it is really a lot more forward thinking and about the future, which we don't see a lot in sports. It's always about the here and now, and I think that was what that whole deal was all about. And speaking of the here and now, obviously another aspect of this too is the players getting involved. There were talks that a CBA, between the women's national team players and men's national team players could be signed once this was all cleared out. I'm very curious to see how that all goes. And you have to imagine Kevin Blue has been in contact with them throughout this process. So you figure it's only a matter of time dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And then that will be another key aspect, because the players are going to play a huge role in the financial growth of both on the field, but even off the field, as these players become more and more marketable, and there's more and more ways for them to help drive this financial growth that Canada Soccer is hoping to take advantage of after this World Cup.
It really does seem like the transparency, the efficiency, the effectiveness that Kevin Blue has brought, or this Kevin Blue era has brought, has been appreciated by everyone involved in Canada Soccer. We hear this on the media side, you see it on the operations side, and we've heard it from amongst the players who maybe aren't directly involved, but also don't feel the uncertainty in the way that they did in the pre-Kevin Blue era. And obviously, even though there isn't a current CBA and a new CBA, this had to come first. This was absolutely the domino that had to fall before they could do that. It does seem to be that there's a belief and more of a trust at every level within Canada Soccer that was really needed, and wasn't guaranteed just because you had different leadership with fresh voices and fresh eyes and maybe different connections and a way of doing things. So I'm really glad that it's come together. I'll say this, I'll have this part of the broadcast conversation because you can't have this conversation. I am very interested to see what CSME does going forward in terms of their business investments in a changing media landscape. We all know that One Soccer has wanted to be on television since day one, and that hasn't been the case, hasn't been possible with the way that the cable structure works here in this country. But the cable structure has changed considerably, not only since One Soccer launched, but in the last 3 years. You'd say since Mark Noonan took the job and had a vision and a hope and a way of doing things broadcast-wise. The whole cable consumption landscape has changed considerably. And One Soccer, CSME, will evolve and change their media strategy. And I'm interested to see how that goes, whether there's more partnership with existing linear legacy and TSN, whether they split it up amongst and share with Sportsnet, whether there's more interest from other entities, if CBC gets back in the soccer game in a more of a concerted effort, as we saw early in the pandemic or early in the days of the CPL. I think there's a real opportunity for soccer to be more accessible. And, the coverage that One Soccer does is fantastic. And obviously the accessibility to those games is great, but the visibility has changed. And we see this with Major League Soccer with the Apple deal. And this year now, where a subscription to MLS Season Pass or a MLS Season Ticket gets you Apple TV, the full package. I wonder if that is going to put more eyes on the league, and if that is going to put more of I would say, a success tag on what that deal has been, because many would say it hasn't been very good for Major League Soccer. But also, they're really carving the path as far as major leagues are concerned, as how to deal with streamers and how to be in this kind of new world where you still need legacy and you still need linear and TV, but you can't go 100% on that, and you also need a deal and a partner and a package that would allow you to grow digitally and do things differently and be as maximum accessible as we've seen with One Soccer and with Apple. So the future of how it's broadcast is something that I geek out about. You guys get in the weeds about League One players and guys you went to high school with, and someone that went to B'nai B'rith baseball with Ben and then now is playing in some foreign league in Estonia, whatever. This is what I get excited about. So TV geek deals.
Well, visibility is a huge part of the package of growing it, right? It's you can't grow what you can't see. So it's obviously going to be a huge part going forward of obviously, can you get the game more accessible to as many people as possible? One just last point to round out just on Kevin Blue. What I will say, and I think like what you see is what you get. And I think that's probably been the biggest breath of fresh air, because just so much of the leadership before maybe from Canada Soccer was just a lot of mixed messaging, and it was loud, and it was not always straightforward. And you look at Kevin Blue, what he's brought, it's just been what you've seen. Like he's obviously been straightforward about it. He gets hired and right away he's like, I wanna hire a top class coach for the men's national team, and he goes out and gets it. And then the women's national team has a scandal at the Olympics, and he deals with it very straightforward and no nonsense. The women's national team needs a new coach. I want a top class coach. He goes and gets it with these deals. He's like, I want a deal done. I want to go get it done. It's one of the things where, as with any executive, you can look at what he does and nitpick it and comb through it with the fine tooth comb, or however the expression goes. But with him, no matter how you feel about his actual dealings and whatnot, you can admire the way he's gone on and just handled himself in such a straightforward and honorable and respectable way. And I mean, we've seen that firsthand. He was obviously great when he came on this show. I think it was about 8 months now. Time flies. And he was just, you ask him, he's not one to shy away to dance around questions. If he has an answer that you don't like to hear, well, he'll say it. I remember visibly when we were talking about World Cup tickets, like he was like, look, it's not, as great as we'd like it to be, but this is the reality and this is why. And there's just something about that straightforward and refreshness that you kind of admire. And of course, from James Johnson's side, him coming into the CPL, it feels like those two personalities ended up blending nicely on this deal. So for Kevin Blue, this obviously is a huge moment for him, because he made the gamble to come to Canada Soccer. Obviously, he's a smart man. He saw the World Cup coming, but he could have come in and tripped over himself a lot, saying no one would have been surprised. So I think you have to give credit to the way he's handled himself, and really, he's endeared himself to this community, I'd say.
Yeah, 100%. I have to agree with that. A completely new era for Canada Soccer, and anyone who's involved in this space, or whenever I speak with Americans and they ask me how things have been post-Qatar or what things are like with this new Jesse Marsh era, Kevin Blue era, Canada Soccer, I always say night and day. That the only thing that feels the same is the logo that is on all the branding. And we thought that was going to change for 26, right? We thought there was going to be a crest. Feels like it'd be a little late, though. No,
maybe not for the World Cup.
End of February.
It feels like it's only a matter of time, because the rebrand itch, is one that does not often go unscratched.